Hello, I am Dr. Eden Arlene, and welcome to Oclast, Episode 2. Before I ever stepped into a museum, art found me. It lived in the corners of my grandmother's home, in music, in the hallways that, I lived, in quilted fabrics, in manicured gardens, as I mentioned in episode 1, and in the ingenuity of people who thrived as everyday problem solvers, sort of stitching together stories that I hadn't yet learned to tell. This specific episode explores and will peel back the velvet rope of the Met Gala to ask, what does it mean to be seen? And who decides what's worth looking at? We're diving into one of fashion's most influential nights, not for its glitz, but for its gatekeeping, its legacy, and the deeper questions about race, representation, and authorship in the world of high culture. Before I start, I want to share just one experience in regards to fashion. So when we talk about fashion, we're sort of navigating two realities. The fashion sense that we sort of live on a daily basis, how we choose to leave our homes and prepare for the world, how we choose to look when we show up at events, and the values we place on certain types of clothing and name brands. So you have that reality of fashion, and then you also have the couture world of fashion, where what you see people show up wearing on the runway, and the sculptural aspect of what they're wearing on the body, and so it makes you feel some type of way, the dramatic aspects of the fashion world. So as for the day-to-day fashion, I want to discuss a few things about that as well. But I want to begin by telling you one of the most pivotal moments in regards to clothing that I had. And this was in 1993. I had graduated from high school. And at the time, I used to work for a Jewish deli in the Riverwalk in New Orleans. And if you knew anything about the Riverwalk then, you knew that it was a hot tourist destination along the Mississippi River. And it consisted of, clothing stores and restaurants, and if you wanted to get alligator on the stick, or if you wanted to get gumbo or some other praline candy or something that was known to New Orleans, you could get that. But I worked at this deli, and the manager was very racist, and I was actually working there making $4 an hour, and I had to listen to him and his racial slurs, and anyway, I ended up getting fired from that job. But anyway, hi Frank. So one of the things that was significant about that specific year, those bomber jackets, the leather jackets that were extremely colorful and well designed, and they were vibrant, and everybody was wearing them. And here I am working, making $4 an hour, okay, working under conditions that I really should not have been. But that's life, right? As a teenager, or becoming an adult, and I felt like, I was earning enough, saving enough that I wanted to get me one of those jackets. Okay. And there was a store, I don't remember the name of the store in the Riverwalk, and I remember seeing that leather jacket, and it had 3 of my favorite colors. It had green, it had red, and it had purple. And on the back it said 1993. And so it was December, and I remember I wanted that jacket, but it was out of my price range. I didn't have the money, but they had layaway. So I decided to put this jacket on layaway. I think I was able to finally pay it off by February of 1994. I wore that jacket only one time because I felt silly wearing this jacket that said 1993 on the back. I never wore it again after wearing it one time because it was a trending thing. And as you know, with trends, they die out, something new comes in. And although the trend of wearing jackets like that hadn't ended, mine said 1993. So it felt silly to me. So although I bought that jacket finished paying it off in 1994, it is currently 2025. I still have it. I still have that jacket. But I think I keep it more so for sentimental reasons, because here's what I learned. I wasn't making money to take care of myself, right? That type of money doesn't allow you to put a roof over your head or even to feed yourself for long term. Nor could it, help me pay for school, right? Because I was eventually going to college, and so there's that. But in thinking and considering my upbringing, right? That was the first time in my life that I did something that was a part of a trend, and I did it to sort of fit in because I felt like, hey, I'm making a little bit of money. I can be a part of what's happening around me. Prior to that moment, growing up, I was always in poverty. Always. Any clothes that I got came from somebody else. I remember when I was young, we had a house fire, and the clothing that I was wearing prior to that, sometimes my shoes had holes in them. It always came from somebody else. I remember one of my great aunts passed away, and we were gifted some of her things. I was gifted all of her clothes. Not the clothes that she was wearing at the time when she passed. I was gifted her wardrobe from 1950. I distinctly remember going to school wearing bell-bottom pants and platform shoes when my peers were wearing Polo, Ralph Lauren, and wearing other name brands, Jabot, just a few that I can think of. And here I was wearing these clothes that did not fit my age or my generation. And I remember my teachers looking at me odd. I remember that. And I remember one particular moment in which my teacher said something to my mom that she, she seems homely, The fact that my teacher was able to say that. So my relationship with clothing, wasn't the best, as far as social engagement and how I fit into the bigger picture of, with other children my age. After that, and what's interesting about those clothes, those 1950s clothes, they did come back. I guess I was 15, 20 years ahead of my time, but all of that came back, and it's called vintage wear. So pretty much I learned from my family members this use of thrift stores, right? At the time, I didn't appreciate any of that. Thrifting? I have an aunt. She has impeccable clothing taste. And she did a lot of thrifting. I didn't know you could find certain name brands even at thrift stores if you were really savvy with it. Today, it's harder to find because now that's the trend. Even my own children shop at the thrift store for things that they're interested in purchasing. So, they don't have a problem with wearing thrift store clothing. Not at all. It's a different generation. I have many of my students the same way. They don't have a problem with it. And, I've seen some of my students walk in with some fly, outfits that have been put together, not reflecting name brand. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So, my aunt, she would put together her clothes and in addition to that was this ability to sew, knowing how to stitch. And since she was younger, she always had an interest in sewing. So she also sewed a lot of clothes, but she really liked to sew curtains. And, that would be her gift to some of us. Like when you buy your first home, she wanted to do the window treatment for you, So, my experience with clothing and fitting in just wasn't good, and it had a huge impact on me. Among other things, there were other things going on in my life that really, but it was the complete story is another day. But that's where I was with clothing. And so once I got to the point where I purchased that jacket, I realized that's not how I want to show up in the world. And so I began to completely reject this idea of trying to fit in anywhere. I rejected it. And so for me, I like clothing that makes a statement. But I don't allow it to define me. I grew up in an environment in community with a lot of my peers that were what you call label hoes. A label hoe is somebody who don't feel like they're anybody unless they have a label on. That's the way I see it. You may disagree, but if you are only defined by wearing the name brand of someone who doesn't look like you, doesn't invest into your community, that's the only way you see value, is how much someone may have paid for their clothing. That is a superficial realm to exist in, and we as a society are still that way. Like, how many times I've seen an interview and someone's running off the number of bags and shoes that they have, and and it's cool if you have, you like to collect. I mean, if anything, what I like to collect? See this beautiful mug right here? That's what I like to collect. You see these books back here? That's what I like to collect. I love hardcover books, So my value system is a bit different. I don't want to be the person that collects things that don't have the possibility to appreciate. And I wonder sometimes, do we understand the difference? What appreciates, what depreciates in value? Clothing can become tattered. It can fade away. It can break down. You can lose it. Some of us also do take care of our clothing more than others, but it's important to understand what your relationship is with clothing. it's important to understand these labels and the people behind the label. For instance, it's my understanding that the person at the helm of Lululemon has made some remarks regarding who should wear those clothing. And, you know, that's not the first time that's anything like that has happened. But I just saw some black women twerking in a Lululemon store. What's going on? What are we doing? It's showing up in the world tone deaf, as if these discussions are not happening and we don't understand our value and place in this world. We don't understand our power and our spending power, especially. So I'll come back to more of what I've been discussing on a personal note, but I want to talk about the Met Gala. And the Met Gala began in 1948 as a fundraiser for the Costume Institute. It was spearheaded by Eleanor Lambert, who's a publicist. For decades, it was a niche society event that changed in 1995 when Anna Wintour took over. Under Wintour's leadership, the gala transformed into a global media spectacle. She doesn't just organize it. She curates the guest list. She approves which designers dress which celebrities and shapes the narrative that gets pushed to the public. She has been praised for raising millions, but also critiqued for reinforcing a narrow, Eurocentric idea of taste, access, and beauty. The economic exclusivity of the event, meaning the $50,000 ticket price, it's high stakes fashion. You know, it reveals a deeper truth. And this isn't just about clothes. It's about who gets to define culture. In recent years, the gala has featured more diverse guests, actors and influencers, and artists of color gracing the carpet in stunning statement-making looks. But the question remains, is this representation or is it performance? We must distinguish between, this idea of visual production, what we see, and then this idea of institutional power. Who controls what we see? How it's contextualized, and how it's also archived. Representation without equity becomes aesthetic wallpaper. Artist Willie Cole confronted this directly in 2021 when the Met borrowed one of his visual motifs from his sculptural works. Spirit Catcher, that was one piece, and then the other one was Luminless Lantern without proper attribution. The resemblance wasn't even subtle. It raised, some painful questions. Is the gala celebrating Black creativity or just consuming it? I think the latter. In 2024, Karain Marcellus published an article entitled 23 Black Designer Looks That Stole the Show Through the Years. She published that in Essence magazine. I applaud personalities such as Bevy Smith and Beth Ann Hardison, and entertainers like 21 Savage and Lena Waithe and Dominique Jackson for stepping outside of the status quo. To wear designers who, like Dapper Dan and Victor Glamont and Virgil Abloh, even wearing Kimberly Golson. I know I'm leaving a couple of names off. I can't remember all of the names, but it is important to note that these designers are epic, right? Gifted in their uses of texture and ornamentation and skill. Their ability to use color and pattern in unique textiles, even with just the right amount of tension and, drama and eccentricity and ingenuity. So whether it's their ability to, work with the weightiness of fabrics and understanding what to emphasize on the body and which body part, the proper stitch, the inclusivity of textiles, such as, perhaps in Dinka cloth or kente or other textiles, to include the element of identity and heritage. These people are gifted in that. But I also want to point out something else. Designers who are African American, or rather I'll say non-white, because there was another, and I want to just compare this to where I'm going with it. Just stay with me for a minute. A few years ago, I think it was 2014, I was invited to a home in LA, in Los Angeles, Korean family. And I was there learning about Korean culture, history, food. And so there was this event at their home, beautiful home. The husband at the time was one of the producers of America's Next Top Model. And one of the things I noticed was, the frenzy of people working around us, the guests, and preparing the food and making sure we were good. I'm telling you, it was a wonderful experience. Meeting the family and, looking at just sort of, the types of things that were being grown in the backyard. We were outside in the backyard. And, the food spread. Everything was delicious. The environment was beautiful. And so one of the things, I learned about was the hanbok, the clothing. And they included a fashion show. And so here are these beautiful hanboks being worn in the fashion show. But none of the models were Korean. They were all white. Now, mind you, this is an event that is about Korean culture or Korean identity, and the models they chose to use were white. And I remember sitting there thinking, why not use Korean models? I remember questioning this and thinking about, even when we have an opportunity to showcase ourselves, we still somehow have to attach something related to whiteness with it, right? So there's this very tall, thin model walking down the runway wearing a hanbok. And so back to the African American designers, I've had an opportunity to, visit their sites and look up their work and see the beautiful work that they do. But also I'm looking at, there's still this attachment in this assimilation to whiteness, even in showing up as, with Black designers. And so there are quite a few designers that use Black models, use various types of bodies and such. But that's something I question, and I want to explore with you your thoughts on this aspect of identity. So the theme this year is Superfine, Tailoring Black Style. It centers on Black dandyism and the politics of menswear from the 18th century to today. The theme is also the title of the Costume Institute's spring exhibition, The Dress Code, Tailored for You. So the exhibit is co-curated by Andrew Bolton and Dr. Monica Miller, a guest curator and author of Slaves to Fashion. I actually have the book, Slaves to Fashion, and I've been taking an opportunity to take some time to looking at, the history of dandyism through the lens of Dr. Miller and her research. I also have Dapper Dan's memoir. And if you haven't had an opportunity to read about Dapper Dan, I think many of you will resonate with his story. And so, when I talk about that ingenuity of people that, I lived with, grew up with, in environment with, I think we all know a Dapper Dan. We know a Dapper Dan. We know men in our communities who wore clothing a little bit different than the rest, so they stood out. The pride, the ideas that are generated to make a living, and using your creativity to sort of push forward the success that you want to see for your life. This is an amazing memoir, understanding the challenges that he faced personally, right? Many of us have gone through some of these challenges, and then also looking at the rise through the fashion industry and some of the barriers that he has faced, and then understanding dandyism through his lens as well. So this is a very good book, Dapper Dan, Made in Harlem. When I think about the curators of this exhibition, I wonder about whether or not this is a turning point for the Met Gala or just a new aesthetic wallpaper for old hierarchies. Will this finally shift curatorial power? Or is it just another display of contained inclusion? And so here's the thing about contained inclusion. Dandyism is specific, right? The way that it comes about culturally. And it is Black identity, right? Black identity. And so when you're asking people to come to an event on this type of stage, this is where the idea of performative comes into play. Because sort of like when we look at people who are not Black people of the African diaspora, wearing kente cloth and adorned in specific cultural clothing, right? We call this cultural appropriation. And here's why cultural appropriation is problematic. It's problematic because culture can't just be put on like a costume. There are so many challenges for Black people and the challenges that they deal with in their identity, whether it's political or it's racial. There's so many things happening in society that have impacted Black people over centuries. And so with that, it's interesting if you think you can just put on something and wear it and not have to deal with the rest of being Black. That's the reason why it's problematic. it's not a compliment. Got something in my mouth there. It's sort of like, when we talk about Native Americans and, how many of us have put our children in costumes so that they can look like a little Indian girl or boy. Problematic. It's problematic. Doesn't matter who does it. So that's what I'm talking about. The dandy is often dismissed as vain or flamboyant. But Monica Miller has reframed this by saying, quote, though often considered fools, hopelessly caught up in the world of fashion, dandies actually appear in periods of social, political, and cultural transition, and they're telling us much about cultural politics through their attitude and appearance, unquote. This legacy traces back to African sartorial traditions like the bold agbadas of Nigeria or the sapeurs of the Congo. In the U.S., Black dandyism shows up in those zoot suits, you remember from Malcolm X, the movie, that is, those big low-hanging suits that they wore. It also comes up, with dandyism during the Harlem Renaissance and the Blaxploitation era. In each case, self-styling becomes an act of resistance. A sharp suit as a form of protest, elegance as armor. You see, there's so many times in history that, African Americans or Black people have been given the scraps of something, okay? And being given the scraps of something means that, one, you're considered less, and so what is thought to be less given to you, the magic that comes from the creativity and ingenuity, so whether it's, circumstances, right? What comes out of being oppressed, blues music. What comes out of, being given the scraps of food, Some of those foods we don't eat anymore. Well, some of us don't eat it anymore, and it may not be considered healthy, but the flavors and textures of foods that have come out of Black culture. So there's a resiliency from people like Dapper Dan, or from, with fashion, or from food. There's so much that has developed that shows the brilliance of a people and their ability to survive and thrive. So when the Met calls us to tailor our looks, we should ask, tailored by whom and to what purpose? Back to Dapper Dan, one of the most important dandy figures, the Harlem Couture, who redefined hip-hop fashion in the 80s and 90s. Now note this, Dapper Dan was styling and creating clothing for people in his community long before he was working with rappers and celebrities. Even today, if you want access to his skill set and you want to have him to style you and put together a piece, he is brilliant in looking at you and coming up with ideas that fit you, and so he's willing to work with anyone, right? So I love the accessibility of Dapper Dan. So he has this signature way of remixing European luxury logos into designs, pretty much that told Black urban stories, right? He was shut down, however, by fashion giants for so-called counterfeiting. only to watch the same brands copy his aesthetic years later. Eventually, Gucci came calling, he offering him a collaboration and an opportunity for visibility. But Dan has never been naive about the stakes. As he puts it, I can quote him saying cultural appropriation and culture exchange breaks down to one thing: economics. An exchange involves somebody getting something for whatever it is they have. Appropriation means you ain't getting nothing, unquote. So this is the difference between being seen and being paid, between inspiration and extraction. So the boutique that Dapper Dan had in Harlem, it was a cultural hub where he dressed LL Cool J, Salt and Pepper. Despite the legal challenges from those major, fashion houses, his journey underscores the importance, of recognizing and compensating the origins of cultural contributions. In the heart of Congo, a fashion movement known as La Cip, it stands for Society of Ambience Makers and Elegant People. It thrives. And it originated in the 1920s. Sapeurs adopted European fashion as a form of resistance against colonial rule, turning elegance into sort of this statement of identity and pride. These dandies invest heavily in their attire, often prioritizing style over basic needs to express individuality and challenge societal norms. Their vibrant outfits and confident demeanor transform the streets into runways. You can go to YouTube and see, how this looks, perhaps down the streets of Kinshasa. Their vibrant outfits and their confidence, they're celebrating fashion as a form of peaceful protest and cultural expression. Now, the agbada, a flowing robe traditionally worn by Yoruba men in Nigeria, symbolizes status, wisdom, and cultural heritage. It comprises of an outer robe, and then there's this inner skirt, and then the trousers and a cap. The agbada is often crafted from luxurious fabrics and adorned with intricate embroidery. Historically, it signified nobility and was worn during significant ceremonies. Today, the agbada transcends its traditional roots, influencing global fashion and serving as a proud emblem of Nigerian identity. I have to tell you, when I see men wearing it, the strength and, their backs are upright and they walk with that strut, and, it's just something to see Black men dressed to the T and feeling good. It's epic. There's nothing like it. So what will the 2025 Met Gala mean? With Monica Miller on board, there's hope for deeper curatorial integrity, despite her lens being from a scholarly background and not artistic. However, the Met has acquired the expertise of independent and in-house scholars across the Black diaspora. Who are they? So there's Dr. Christine Chasinska. She is a British Jamaican designer and senior curator at Victor and Albert Museum. She has curated exhibitions for the V&A since 2022. and she also curated an exhibition with the Craft Council in 2021, and in the Institutional Visual Arts in 2012. She is currently in the process of writing Fashioning African Diaspora Masculinity. So I am anxious to see that work finished and what's to come of it, right? There's also Jason Cyrus, who has published 2 articles entitled Decoding Savage Beauties and Heavenly Bodies. He's relatively new to the exhibition space, however. He has presented at a number of conferences, scholarly papers, so he has a gift for the creative as well, being a panelist and a researcher. So he is someone who will offer much promise and insight to the fashion industry and scholarship. Then you have Thelma Golden, who is the director and chief curator at the Studio Museum in Harlem, and has been in that role since 2005. And so the Studio Museum is one of the most important institutions globally for Black creatives. And Golden is a fixture in the art world for her expertise, knowledge, and eye for talent. There are a number of other experts who have been consulted for this exhibition. And so there's a lot that has gone into, building this event and the exhibition that is also ongoing right now, to ensure that there is, a conscious effort by bringing in the diversity of curators and historians and experts of the art world. There seems to be an intentional practice with this event and the exhibition to ensure that something is being done right and things are being honored with integrity, right? So I still want to, make sure that we understand the historical significance and legacy of the Met Gala, but understanding too, when we are inclusive in this way, does it truly honor Black culture, Black identity, without still being performative? I noticed that among the expert curators were 2 names that I did not recognize as curators at all. And as I did a little bit more digging, pretty much they have funded the museum. And so I guess they were assigned the role as consulting curators, which is very odd for me. And I question the relationship that power and money allows access to sort of defining narratives that, don't concern you. So anyway, but that's what I mean about, these legacies. But legacies of bias don't unravel with one exhibition. There's some important questions, Will this event invite new authorship or simply new aesthetics? Can a space built on exclusivity truly, embody liberation? What does it mean to honor Black style while protecting Black labor, creativity, and legacy? This isn't just about who walks the carpet. It's about who writes the script. I think we should stay curious, be critical about what we're presented with, right? And above all, let's keep asking who gets to shape the story and why. Let me pull up the website really quickly. I want to look at the names of individuals associated with the Met Gala on May 5th, 2025. And there are a number of individuals who are on the committee. And so from musicians like Andre 3000, A$AP Rocky, Pharrell Williams, Coleman Domingo, Spike Lee, Regina King, Dapper Dan, Doechii, Janelle Monáe, Angel Reese. There's a number of names. Cara Walker, visual artist. Usher. So there's a number of people across disciplines, whether they are authors or athletes or musicians or actors. So the thing about this, many of us, as I think I've already stated, over the years when I've talked to my students or I asked them about the Met Gala, we're so obsessed with celebrity culture. We're so obsessed with them that we forget important questions to ask, right? There have been a number of these events and I've always questioned, we see the big names who perform and dance for us, right? But when they have an opportunity, to advance, the careers of designers, who are they wearing? And that's when, this idea of Anna Wintour and her control and her the power dynamics of who gets invited, because this isn't, you could have $50,000, but that don't mean you have an invitation to this event, So, but there's something also about her in this approval process of the designer. So this is a part of the gatekeeping, and gatekeeping exists in every sector of the art world. Every sector of the art world. There are a number of visual artists who have had their careers pushed forward. Yes, they're talented and they're gifted, but the thing about visual artists is, the narratives and the work. Does it speak to something that could assimilate in certain environments, or is it too real for some? I remember Titus Kaphar created a short docu series or docu episode, Shut Up and Paint, and it's accessible. I think it's less than 15 minutes in length. And when you have more to say that questions the establishment, that questions what's happening in the world and these experiences of underrepresented people, the real stories don't necessarily get told, or if they get told, they are not appreciated. And so it's something to consider. Who's representing a culture, who's placed out front, who's speaking real, right? Because just because you see Black faces attending the Met, as we've seen for a number of years, doesn't mean power. It doesn't mean power. It doesn't mean full inclusion, because we know that many of the designers have not been African American or other people of color. And so this is an opportunity to ask those questions and elevate the discussion about who we see and who truly represents all of us, the underrepresented per se. And so that's all I have, and that's what this is about. And I hope that this episode gets you to think and question, and also our relationship to clothing and our relationship to labels. Labels don't make us. No, they don't. Who you are and facing the reality of who you are stripped naked, just like when you get out the shower and you look at yourself, that's who you are. And so this right here, this exterior, doesn't make me, doesn't make you. Although it's nice to look good. There's a saying, a hit dog will holler. If anything that I said, you felt any offense to, are you the hit dog? And good night.